I'm Andrew Patterson from interest.co.nz. Welcome to another in our Business Success series. Today I'm with Garth Sutherland, the Chief Executive and founder of Nexus6. Hi there, Garth.
Hi.
So Garth, you've been involved in a number of high-profile companies around the years. Over the years, you've spent some time working for Microsoft, strong science background. Tell us a bit about Nexus6, which you decided to start in 2000. What was the vision you had in mind?
Right, so I had just come back from my overseas experience. I've been working around the world in the technology sector for about 6 years. And I returned home and was looking to enter a different stage in my life. And one of the key issues for me was that I hadn't grown out of my own asthma as I'd hoped to do in my earlier years, and had a realisation that I was going to be on the asthma medications for the rest of my life. So I was really looking for ways of lifestyle changes and the like to minimise the amount of medication I was taking while retain very good levels of asthma control, so I could enjoy my life, enjoy my sports and my relationships and everything. So I started looking at different ways of improving my asthma, and as part of that, for example, getting super fit, changing my diet, all these sorts of things. As part of that, I was starting to record my medication usage as really one of the metrics around wellness. And what I soon realised is that it was very, very difficult to consistently track medication usage of the asthma medications. For example, there are multiple medications from the controller or preventative medications that are taken twice daily through to the relief medications which are used as needed. And just keeping track of that was very hard. But I also realised that was really the key indicator to asthma control as well. So I started applying the skills that I had been learning through my career in the technology sector to automating that process for myself as a patient. That was the driver.
And I can sympathise with you, because as an asthmatic myself, as a kid, I was one of those that was lucky enough to grow out of it. But I remember how debilitating it was as a child. Couldn't play sport. It's a very constraining condition. So it became something for you with a science background that you could see a business opportunity out of as well, because we know this is big in New Zealand. It's big globally as an issue, isn't it?
Right. Asthma is one of the big chronic diseases. And also, not just, I guess, in terms of chronic lung disease, there's asthma and also chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. That's another one of the very big chronic diseases which are enormous burdens to society in terms of cost and implication on people's ability to live their best.
How difficult was it? Because we know, that this is big business trying to take on medical development, and you're obviously up against some very big names in the business with very deep pockets. Why did you sense that you could do it almost by yourself, just plugging away with a science background when the big guys hadn't been able to crack this?
Well, I think a couple of factors to that. One is that I wasn't so concerned about those guys in the early days. I always saw myself as a service provider to industry. If I got the technology right for myself, and then some other people benefited from it as well, I saw myself as a service provider to industry. So rather than going up against them, really trying to solve these problems from a patient perspective and then provide them to industry, because my goal was really to sort out my own condition and then also make the same tools available to other people. And industry is the way to get those tools to other patients. So from early on, we've been seeking partnerships with industry to help deliver our innovation into the hands of patients. But also, I think, to your point, Andrew, innovation is hard, and it's very hard for the big companies to innovate. And so there is a need for innovation, and often that is provided from the smaller agile companies.
Explain what it is you do, because you're getting into this interesting area of telemedicine, which is effectively where you get independent monitoring of the condition, by using SIM cards and so forth. So just explain what the process is that you've actually developed.
Yeah, sure. So it's quite an interesting way we came up with the real-time monitoring of the medication usage, and that was that. Our very early devices were devices that had a USB port in them, or in fact, the very first ones had a serial port. This is before the days of USB. Then we went to USB. And I found myself, if I was deeply honest with myself, I didn't have the access to the information I wanted on a daily basis, simply because of the adherence issue with uploading data. And what I noticed when I was at Microsoft was, the PDA technology was extremely useful as a phone, etc. But even when you could upload your email to your smartphone through a USB connection, this is before email came online through the cellular connection, you still didn't really necessarily always have your email with you and up to date. But that really changed once email started updating in real time through the cellular connection. And so I sat down in a dark room and was really honest with myself and said, as a founder of this company, what is the problem here? Why is it that there's friction in terms of getting to the data, which I definitely wanted and valued? And the reality was that, that things just needed to be made simpler for patients. And the simplicity came in putting the cell phone technology into the inhaler. Earlier on, we worked with the Bluetooth technologies, but they weren't really there yet in terms of mass adoption. So we went to cellular technologies, which just made it so simple. You take the inhaler, you take a puff, as I will right now, and the next thing, that inhaler is going to dial up, and my data is going to be on my database, my personal, private, secure database online, and that information is going to be sent to me and to the other people I've authorised to use, and it's that simple. So we came at it from that perspective of trying to solve the problems, knowing that there's value in the data, but trying to remove the friction towards accessing it.
And I remember that, with my own treatment, because it predated cell phones, but I got put onto a diary program, and I had to, do an exercise and then see, how much the asthma kicked on for. But that whole process can be automated now, and a doctor can follow that at a distance. Right,
yeah. That is the idea that, and I'm just talking from a patient's perspective, that for patients and their caregivers, in the case of children, this information is core to managing the disease. In fact, the global guidelines for, or the global initiative for asthma and for COPD require patients to monitor medication use. In particular, the use of reliever medication is a key indicator to disease control. But also what's key is ensuring that for those patients who are prescribed a controller or preventative medication, that they're taking those on a very regular basis. And the way to get that, when I started out, the inhalers didn't have any feedback, they're just a can and a piece of plastic. And so as a patient, I'm sure, Andrew, you found this yourself, you're really in the dark. And I remember, managing my own asthma attacks, on day 3 as a child, and not knowing what the heck I was taking. I've been taking so much medication, and just really, especially when you start getting low on oxygen, it's very difficult to make good decisions. It's incredibly difficult, and that's when you need the information. For example, right now, what I'm going through right now. I use that information today.
And what have you found particularly about the challenges of choosing to remain in New Zealand and develop this technology from here versus taking it to the US and just setting it up there where you're surrounded by, I guess, a much bigger industry and infrastructure? Has that been a real challenge, choosing to maintain yourself here in New Zealand?
Well, there's pros and cons. It wasn't necessarily a conscious decision to do it here or in any other place. It was that time in my life that I returned home. But I think, the challenges, I guess, were early on there wasn't, the infrastructure for new technology companies was still being developed. And by that I mean at a public level. Certainly there was, private infrastructure for companies such as Fisher & Paykel Healthcare to access funding from their founders, the appliances business. But in terms of public infrastructure, Nexus was the second company to raise capital from the first formal angel network here in New Zealand. So those pieces of infrastructure were still being created, whereas in the Valley or etc. they were already in place. However, there were a number of advantages as well. I guess we, from very early on, actually started selling internationally. So our first sale was here to one of the finest respiratory research groups in New Zealand, a group by the name of the Medical Research Institute of New Zealand. And in particular, Professor Beasley, who I was introduced to through Trade and Enterprise New Zealand. I showed him what I'd developed for my own asthma management, and Prof said, well, look, we can use that for our clinical trials. And straight away that technology went into its first sale in clinical trials, and we're still publishing with that group today. But through that network, our second sale came out of Perth, and I think the third sale was out of the United States, and we were pretty much born global from day one. Probably again because the New Zealand market's a small market, and so there are limited sales opportunities here, so we had to get offshore pretty quick.
What about protecting the IP here? Because this is pretty significant what you've actually achieved.
Right, it's a key issue. So there's, in terms of registered rights, I guess our focus has been on the international patenting system. And there are some advantages to the New Zealand patenting system. And we typically file here and abroad. The New Zealand office, being a small office, processes IP very quickly. But there are variances between the New Zealand Patent Office and New Zealand IP Acts and those offshore. And I guess to that extent, a company like Nexus or any other technology company around the world is always looking to file in the major important markets. We have very good people here for that, so I don't see any particular disadvantage. I guess we don't get caught up too much in the local legislation, and we file into those big markets in accordance with their guidelines or their legislation.
When you started looking around, did it surprise you that nobody had joined some dots together here to come up with this? Because what you've effectively done is brought a couple of different technologies to a health platform and come up with an outcome. But did it surprise you that somebody else hadn't thought of that sort of approach?
Well, yeah. Well, what I found reasonably quickly into it, Andrew, was that some other people have been working on it. There's plenty of prior art in this space, but that some of the solutions still needed further work. And we were fortunate to meet a lot of those pioneers. It was a very real privilege to meet them. We met them at the American Thoracic Society meeting and meetings in Europe, and I guess we've been able to advanced the technology on the back of their work, so we're very grateful to them and respectful of their work. But I think the commercialisation of this type of technology is particularly challenging because it's a multi-dimensional problem. Firstly, we've got, we're putting computing technology alongside a drug. So there's a whole bunch of regulatory and legislative factors that need to be dealt with. There is the huge body of prior art in relation to these technologies. There is the advancement of what's happening in the internet over the last 10 years and the move from to web and to app to smartphone, and that massive transformation, the opportunities that come around that. So then there is, getting the costing right, getting the health economics right, and most importantly, showing that the product has health economics benefit, so that it's saving the healthcare system and the patients who use it money. Because that's, of course, at the end of the day, what makes the healthcare system work.
Given the scale of the global problem of asthma, how big could this product be?
Well, if we look at the inhalation market, it's a significant market. The pharmaceutical companies are very large companies, and the drug delivery companies that support them are large. As we know, the blockbuster drugs in respiratory medicine are multi-billion-dollar drugs, and the devices themselves are manufactured and supplied to patients in the billions of units. For example, I think it was in 2011, GSK manufactured their 1 billionth discus inhaler. So the numbers are large, very large.
The reality is, though, that somebody is going to come and potentially wave a big check under your nose, aren't they, and just offer you that chance to cash in. Is that a realistic prospect, do you think?
I think that the minute a venture takes on external funding, you're into the game of having to provide those shareholders a return on their investment. So although the founding principles of Nexus6 were to help patients manage their asthma, for some time I funded the company using my own resources, which I was very privileged to do. But shortly afterwards, you realise that these types of technologies take many, many millions and potentially tens of millions, well, definitely tens of millions of dollars to take, if not hundreds, to take worldwide. And therefore you quickly move into the process of bringing in external capital. Now that is a very interesting and valuable thing to do. And so Nexus has recently closed its first venture round, and as part of that we have brought in place we've been lucky to receive investment from a very well-respected life sciences investor by the name of Bioscience Managers, who bring with them a whole lot of expertise in helping us get that technology into the hands of patients. But we're very clear about our role in this, and that is to solve these problems, and then as quickly as possible get those solutions into the channel partners that can deploy them into the patient's hands as quickly as possible.
And just finally, what's your vision? Where would you like to see this company in 5 years' time?
Well, I'd just love to see other kids using smart inhalers around the world and experiencing great health through it. That's the founding principles behind it. At the same, we want everyone to win in that. Certainly, the research community that we're working with are having tremendous results with our technology now. We've got a paper that's been published in Lancet on Monday with MRI-NZ, and they've been able to establish conclusively the safety of a very mainstream medication treatment regime for asthma and COPD. So we want them to be successful, and we want our industry partners, the pharmaceutical companies that we're supplying our technology to for clinical trials, so they have better data for their regulators, and ultimately for the physicians and the patients and mum and dad.
So Garth, this is a business that you have a very personal stake in, because you're dealing with an issue which has affected you personally and medically, obviously, as well. How much do you think that has been a real contributor to your success to this point?
I believe it's been critical for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm using that technology every day to manage my asthma, and I'm coming back to the team saying, hey guys, we need to change this, we need to improve this, we need to change it. So I think that's one reason. And number two, all these ventures are tough, and sometimes you have to dig deep with them, and certainly I've been able to do that through my experiences with asthma, so it's been helpful. But I think that was in the earlier stages. Now we're growing a much bigger team and very, very talented people coming on board. So now it's a big team effort.